Chapter 41 of the battle which Amadis had promised the fair child Briolania to perform against Abisos and his two sons in revenge of her father's death. This history is related to you how Amadis promised Briolania to revenge her father's death, and how she gave him a sword, and that when in his combat with Gasinan he broke the sword. He gave the pieces to Gandalin's care. You shall now hear how the battle was performed, and what great danger he underwent because that broken sword, not from any fault of his own, but for the ignorance of his dwarf Ardian. Amadis, now recollecting that the time was come to perform his promise, acquainted Orianda, and requested her leave, though to him it was like dividing his heart from his bosom to leave her. And she granted it, albeit with many tears, and a sorrow that seemed to presage what evil was about to happen. Amadis took the queen's leave for form's sake, and departed with Gaelor and Argives. They had gone about half a league when he asked Gandalin if he had brought the 3 pieces of the sword which Briolania had given him, and finding that he had not, bade him return and fetch them. The dwarf said he would go, for he had nothing to delay him, and this was the means whereby Amadis and Oriana were both brought into extreme misery, neither they nor the dwarf himself being culpable. The dwarf rode back to his master's lodgings, found the pieces of the sword, put them in his skirt, and was retiring when, as he passed the palace, he heard himself called. Looking up, he saw Orianda and Maliba, who asked him why he had not gone with his master. "I set out with him," said he, "but returned for this," and he showed her the broken sword. "What can your master want a broken sword for?" quoth Oriana. "Because," said the dwarf, "he values it more than the 2 best whole ones, for her sake who gave it him." "Who is she?" "The lady for whom he undertakes this combat, and though you are daughter to the best king in the world, yet, fair as you are, you would rather win what she has won, than possess all your father's lands." "What gain so precious has she made? Perchance she has gained your master?" "Yes, she has, his whole heart, and he remains her knight to serve her." Then, giving his horse the lash, he galloped away, little thinking the wrong he had done. Oriana remained pale as death. She burst into bitter reproaches against the falsehood of Amadis, and wrung her hands, and her heart was so agitated that not a tear did she shed. It was in vain that Maliba and the damsel of Denmark strove to allay her rage with reasonable words, as passionate women will do. She followed her as passionate women will do. She followed her own will, which led her to commit so great an error that God's mercy was necessary to repair it. The dwarf rejoined his master and showed him the pieces of his sword, but Amadis asked him no questions, and he said nothing of what had passed. Presently they met a damsel, who asked whither they were going. "Along this road. I advise you to leave it." "Why?" "Because no knight hath taken it for 15 days, but he hath either been slain or wounded." "And who hath done all this mischief?" quoth Amadis. "The best knight in the arms I've ever seen." "Damsel," said Argives, "you must show us this knight." "He will show himself so soon as you enter the forest." The damsel then followed them. They looked around the forest in vain, till as they were at the other side thereof, they saw a knight of good stature, completely armed, on a roan horse, holding a lance, and a squire by him with 4 other lances. He speaking to his squire, the man laid lances against the tree, and came up to the knights. "Sirs, yonder knight sends to inform me that he hath kept this forest for 15 days against all knights errant with fair fortune, and for the pleasure of the joust hath yet stayed a day and a half longer than his time appointed. He says that if it please you to joust with him, he is ready, but there shall be no sword combat, for in that he has done much evil against his own will, and will avoid it henceforth if he can." Argaith had taken his helm and thrown his shield around his neck, while the squire was speaking. "Tell him to defend himself," quoth he. They ran their horses, their spears brake, and Argaves was dismounted, and his horse ran loose, whereat he was greatly ashamed. Gaelor took his arms to avenge him. The lances were broken. Their bodies met with such force that Gaelor's horse, being the weaker and more weary, fell and threw him, and they ran away. Amadis, seeing this, blessed himself. "In truth," said he, The knight may be well praised, for he hath proved himself against two of the best in the world. But as he went on to take his turn, he found Gaylor on foot with his sword in hand, defying the knight to battle. But the knight laughed at him. And Amadis said, Brother, do not chafe yourself. It was the covenant that there should be no sword battle. Then he bade the stranger defend himself, and they ran at each other. Their spears flew up in splinters. They came against each other, shield and helmet. The horse fell with Amadis, and the horse broke his shoulder. The knight of the forest was dismounted, but he held the reins and lightly took the saddle again. Quoth Amadis, You must joust again, for this encounter was equal. We both fell. I do not choose to joust again, said he. Amadis replied, Knight, you do me wrong. Right yourself when you can, said the other. I am bound no farther, as I sent to tell you. And then he galloped away through the forest. Amadis leapt upon Gandalin's horse, and told his companions to follow him as fast as they could to find that knight, for they were all greatly abashed. Quoth the damsel, It will be foolish quest. All the knights of King Lusart's household would fail to find him without a guide. My friend, said Gaylor, belike you know who he is and where to be found? If I do, quoth she, I mean not to tell you, for I would bring no harm to so good a man. Ah, damsel, said Gaylor, by faith you owe to God, and by the thing in the world which you love best, tell me what you know of him. She answered, I care not for these conjurings, and I will not discover him for nothing. Ask what you will, quoth Amadis. Tell me your name, and promise me each a boon hereafter, and when I shall demand it. They in their earnestness promised. When she heard the name of Amadis, she exclaimed, God be praised, for I was seeking you. And wherefore? You shall know when it's time, but tell me, have you forgotten your promise to the daughter of that king Sobradisa, who let loose the lions to save you? I am now going, replied Amadis, to perform the battle. Why then, quoth she, would you turn astray to follow this knight, who is not so easy to find as you imagine, when your day is appointed for combat? She says true, sir brother, said Gaylor. Go you with Argives upon this business. I will follow the knight with this damsel, for I shall never have joy till I find him, and I will join you in time for the battle if it be possible. In God's name, cried Amadis. But tell us, damsel, the name of the knight. I know it not, yet once I was a month with him, and never saw else such deeds in arms, but I can show you where he is to be found. Then Gaylor departed with her. Amadis and Argives proceeded till they came to the castle of Torin, the dwelling of that fair damsel, who was now grown so beautiful that she appeared like a bright star. What think you of her? Said Amadis. Argives answered, If her Maker designed to make her beautiful, he has most perfectly accomplished his will. They were disarmed, and mantles given them, and they were conducted into the hall. But when Briolania saw Amadis, how young he was, for he was not yet 20, and how beautiful, for even the scars in his face became him, and of what fair renown he was, she thought him the best knight in the world, and greatly affected him, so that when by his help she had recovered her kingdom, she would have given him herself, but that Amadis told right loyally how he was another's.